All right, guys, today I want to touch on the Bitcoin chart, and I want to go over a familiar pattern. And I did touch on this on my weekly webinar about 2 weeks ago, and I mentioned we were looking at a pretty good pop coming on Bitcoin most likely. In fact, what I said was, I will be very shocked if we don't see significantly higher prices very soon here. And the reason for that was a pattern that popped up on my Bitcoin chart. And so I want to go over this, and I want to touch on a couple mistakes that newer traders make when they're looking for patterns like this, because it's very relevant. Even though this is a Bitcoin chart, even if you don't trade Bitcoin, the same pattern pops up on fiat currencies all the time. So if you're trading spot Forex, you definitely want to pay attention here, because I think this will help you a little bit. But let's go ahead and get started here. Right here where I'm dropping this line, that right there, and this right here. Where these meet at, you're going to see the major moving average here as well that I've got painted on my chart. But this is where price was at when I had said I am looking for a pretty significant pop on this. Since then, we've gone from 66.70 all the way up to about 84.50. So that's about a $1,800 pop on Bitcoin, which is very, very significant. In fact, if I grab my handy calculator out here, $1,700 divided by 66.70, you're dealing with a 25% pop on Bitcoin. That is a pretty significant pop. So I just wanted to touch on this to show you why I saw this thing coming. But let's get rid of these lines here. Okay, first of all, I was watching this trend right here, and I noticed something very significant about it. Here's the top of the trend. We pushed down. We had a very small pullback to the upper band, another push down, another small pullback, another push down, a very minor pullback here, more like a consolidation, another push down, another consolidation, another push down. Keep in mind, each time we have a new low right here, 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 and also you have lower highs as well. Here's a high, here's a high, here's a high, here's a high, here's a high. So what is the market telling us right now? The market is telling us that we have new sellers pushing price down, and there's really not a lot of buyers present because they're not pushing the market up at all. But we came down into this region right here where my cursor's at, and what we saw next was we saw a pop all the way back up to the last high. Notice this entire move up. We were not able to push up to the last high here, the last high here, the last high here, the last high here. Typically, when you see this happening, that is an indication that perhaps buyers are getting ready to take over the market. So I saw this nice little push up here. Once I see this, I am no longer willing to short this market because this is telling me there's a significant amount of buyers coming in off this level. So I do not want to sell anymore. But we had a push up into this region right here, which was the last high. And then take note what happened right here. We had another push down right here, and it could not take out the last low. So it looks like for the time being, sellers are drying up. And then we immediately push back up into this region. Again, this was a top. Right here is the same level, and we pushed up to it once again. The key here is we have now a higher low, which means there are fewer sellers coming in to push price down. So when I saw this, I said, hey, this could be an indication that the markets are getting ready to shift to the other direction. But again, I need a lot of confirmation before I'm just going to jump into any kind of trade. So just because I see a head and shoulders pattern like this does not mean you want to get into the trade. You need more confirmations than just that. One of the biggest failures that I see a lot of newer traders making too is they'll spot a head and shoulders pattern like this, and it can a lot of times it'll be in the middle of the trend or just in the most obscure places, and they'll just jump into the trade because it's a head and shoulders pattern, and that is not something you want to do. You definitely want to look at your higher time frames, and you want to make sure that the higher time frames are in agreement. And it is very strongly recommended that you are at a significant area of support or resistance before you take a head and shoulders or an inverse head and shoulders. For example, let's zoom out just a little bit here. The head and shoulders occurred right here. Here's the head, the base of the pattern, and here's the shoulder. if you go left just a little bit, you are going to see this is a major, and I mean a major pivot in the market. If this level breaks down on Bitcoin, you're probably going to see significantly lower prices here. And again, you can see going back in history, you had a top here. We pushed up again. We finally broke through it. We came back down to retest it. And then we had this very euphoric move, which pushed prices up to about 20,000 when everybody lost their mind. And then we came back down to retest this region right here. We popped, retested it again. We popped, and then here we are again. So this is a very, and I mean a very significant area of support. So if you come into a very large area of support, you can expect a very large move, which we have definitely seen off of this level. So do keep in mind, if you're trading a double top or you're trading a double bottom or a head and shoulders, inverted head and shoulders, whatever pattern you're looking at trading, when you see them setting up, make sure they're at a significant area of support or resistance for the best results. Because a lot of times what people will do is this will be maybe in the middle of a trend and they don't realize support is way down here. And so what happens is they're buying here and then it just isn't able to break through this resistance line, which is the moving average, and then it'll just fall apart and they'll lose. Again, typically it shouldn't be a big loss because your stop should be pretty tight because you do have a higher low here. But you can avoid a lot of these losses if you pay attention to what's going on here. So we do have a major area of support down here, and you have price action telling you that perhaps the market wants to reverse higher. Another thing, if you look at the tricks down here, you can see that in spite of the fact that we're making lower lows right here, you can see the tricks is making a higher low. This is called divergence. And so this is indicating that maybe the market wants to pop as well. So there's another indicator that maybe price wants to reverse. But the big thing for me, and you should always check the higher time frames here. This was really the catalyst that made me say this is definitely going higher here. Always check the higher time frames and make sure they are in agreement with what you're trying to do. Because if they are not, if the higher time frames are working against you, then you're probably not going to see a lot of money being profited off your trade, if any at all. In fact, if the higher time frames are against you, unless you are at a very solid top or bottom and you're looking for a reversal, you're probably going to lose the trade. So make sure you're at either very strong support levels or resistance levels, or make sure the higher time frames are definitely in agreement. So in this case right here, Bitcoin, you can see right down here is the head and shoulders. Kind of hard to see on the weekly time frame. But what I want to point out is this right here. This was where we began to move up. In fact, let me go back to the daily time frame here. Right here is where we were looking for a potential pop right here. Well, once this candle was painted, because we pushed back up into the resistance area again and we have a higher low. And of course, like I said, we do have divergence on the daily time frame as well. But if you go to the weekly time frame, let me zoom in here. Take a look at the tricks. The tricks has already turned green as we are pushing up into the band trying to break it. And in fact, once we painted this candle, it actually crossed up, which is even more significant. But the key here is this. The weekly time frame momentum, this tricks has already turned green. So this is telling us the market is probably getting ready to go higher. That is very key, because if we were pushing up into resistance up here and this was still red, it was still dropping, this indicates to me a very bearish market, but that is not at all the case. So the weekly time frame is definitely confirming that you are going to see higher prices as we created that bullish looking pattern and bullish price action on the lower time frame, which is the daily time frame. Again, let me repeat that. The momentum had already shifted on the weekly, and since it's a weekly chart, the odds of it going in your favor are greater because the higher time frames are working with you, and also higher time frames typically mean bigger moves. So your risk to reward on this is actually very good. So, but again, you want to make sure you're checking your higher time frames. Because if the momentum is working with you, you're going to have an increased likelihood of a trade working out for you. And if it is against you, again, if prices were trying to push up and break through this level right here, and this was still red right here instead of being green, and it's still dropping, This means the momentum on the weekly time frame is still very weak, and it's going to work against your trade. So try to make sure you're either trading very powerful levels, or you're making sure, or preferably both actually, the momentum is working in your favor, meaning the higher time frames are switching gears and they are working with you instead of against you. But just wanted to point that out. Those are the things that I was seeing on Bitcoin. Again, you had price action looking pretty bullish, and then you had some divergence, and then you had the higher time frames along with being at major support down here. And that's why we are popping. This high up here was my first target on this, so we have hit that. It is possible that it could continue to move higher. There are some resistance levels right up in here and right up in here. Not sure those are areas that I'm quite willing to short. It depends on what the market's doing once it does get up into those regions here. But that is why I was looking for a long on Bitcoin, and hopefully no one was shorting at the bottom, because that is a terrible idea in light of what kind of pattern we had setting up here. But hopefully that helps somebody. If you have any questions, as always, get at me or just type them in the comments, and I'll be more than happy to help.